Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. On the program this week, Israeli troops enter Gaza's Al-Shifa Hospital as thousands shelter inside, plus families of Israeli hostages embark on 5-day march to Prime Minister Netanyahu's office. Following days of heightened tension, Israeli forces stormed Gaza's largest hospital, where thousands of patients, including newborns, were stranded. The operation was carried out in pursuit of Hamas militants. Israel maintains that the hospital has been utilized by Hamas as a base, alleging that the group has established an operational presence at the hospital. This is Gaza's largest hospital, as medics raced to evacuate patients from a ward that was said to be hit by shelling. Thousands of patients, medical staff and displaced people have been trapped at Al-Shifa Hospital during the Israeli assault on Gaza. "39 premature babies weighing less than 3.3 pounds were left in critical condition after being taken out of their incubators because the hospital ran out of power. 3 of those babies are said to have died." Israeli tanks took up positions at its gates this week and entered the hospital in what the military said was a targeted operation on Wednesday. Al-Shifa, Gaza's largest hospital, has been a major hotspot of the war for weeks, taking in wounded or the homeless. Israel says Al-Shifa sits on top of an Hamas headquarters, using the hospital's patients as human shields, an accusation Hamas denies.
Based on intelligence information and an operational necessity, IDF forces are carrying out a precise and targeted operation against Hamas in a specified area in the Al-Shifa Hospital. The IDF is conducting a ground operation in Gaza to defeat Hamas and rescue our hostages. Israel is at war with Hamas, not with the civilians in Gaza. The IDF forces include medical teams and Arabic speakers who have undergone specified training to prepare for this complex and sensitive environment, with the intent that no harm is caused to the civilians being used by Hamas as human shields. In recent weeks, the IDF has publicly warned time and again that Hamas's continued military use of Shifa Hospital jeopardizes its protected status under the international law. We also gave ample time to stop this unlawful abuse of the hospital.
Israel vowed to wipe out Hamas after militants burst across the fence of Gaza and rampaged through Israeli towns, killing civilians on October the 7th. 1,200 people were killed and around 240 were dragged back to Gaza in the deadliest day of Israel's 75-year history. But Israel's response, including a total siege and constant bombardment of the crowded enclave, has killed many thousands of civilians and alarmed countries around the world. Palestinians, Wafa and Omar, have lost 70 family members between them.
In total, I have tragically lost 30 people of my family, 3 of which just this morning, back home in Gaza, Palestine. 7 of them were children. All their lives, their ideas and aspiration for this world cut brutally short. What did they do? What did baby Omar do? This is a clear genocide. We will not be silenced. We will keep fighting and speaking for all of the innocent people who were murdered by the Israeli occupation that has been going for over 75 years. How many more innocent Palestinians need to be killed for the world to come to its senses?
I have lost 40 family members, 2 families. Entire family has been wiped up. The first one is the judge Fatima al-Mukhallalati. She was the first female judge in Gaza. She was practicing for more than 40 years. She was sleeping in her house with her husband, the judge. She was 75 years old, and her husband was 77 years old. They were sleeping in the house. Their children were with them, and their grandchildren were with them.
Since the war began last month, 2/3 of the Gaza population has been made homeless, and medical authorities say more than 12,000 people have been confirmed killed, around 40% of them children.
Hospital corridors crammed with the injured, the sick, the dying, morgues overflowing, surgery without anesthesia, tens of thousands of displaced people sheltering at hospitals, families crammed into overcrowded schools, desperate for food and water. More than 10,800 people have now been killed in Gaza, almost 70% of them women and children. On average, a child is killed every 10 minutes in Gaza. 1.5 million people have been displaced and are looking for shelter anywhere they can find it. But nowhere and no one is safe. Nowhere and no one is safe. As more and more people move to a smaller and smaller space, overcrowding is increasing the risks of outbreaks of diarrheal and respiratory disease and skin infections.
More than 100 United Nations employees have also been killed in Gaza, the largest toll of humanitarian workers in the organization's 78-year history. According to the World Health Organization, more than half of hospitals in Gaza, 22 out of 36, are unable to function due to a lack of fuel, damage, attacks, and insecurity. The Gazan people are also struggling as water and food supplies run critically low. Meanwhile, thousands of Israelis continue to demonstrate at various locations across the country, urging the government to secure the immediate release of hostages abducted by Hamas and held in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is facing escalating pressure to ensure the safety and freedom of the hostages. For these families, time has stood still since the 7th of October as they wait for news of their loved ones captured by Hamas. Only a handful of the more than 240 hostages have been freed so far. On Tuesday, families kicked off a 5-day march from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to demand the government does more to secure their release.
We're marching to the Prime Minister to shout to him that we need them home now. We need them home now. We need him to do everything he can to bring our loved ones back home.
We want answers. We want to know what happens, and besides that, I don't know what else to do, honestly. Like, I don't have a solution, but it's not my job to get a solution. It's my job to demand my family back.
We have to do everything. Our government has to do everything to release them. Otherwise, we will be a mentally wounded country. It will not be no victory and no standstill, nothing, if we don't release them. They were kidnapped. They didn't do anything wrong. It was the government who had to protect them. The society who had to protect them. They were there, soldiers on the border.
Captives range in age from 9 months to 85 and are believed to be held in tunnels deep under the Gaza Strip.
We have no time. My grandmother has no time. We need to return them back home now. We need the International Women's Organization to shout with us that the woman's life of the Israelis are not less important than the woman's life all around the world. Please don't look at the other way. It's not an issue of the Israelis, or not an issue of the Jews. It's a humanitarian issue that should be concerned as such.
My sister has asthma and chronic sinusitis. We can only imagine how she's struggling, gasping for air, wherever she's being held underground. Can you understand the feeling of fighting to breathe? Such a basic need. She also has chronic kidney stones that cause her for countless of hospitalizations and horrible pain. Do you think anyone over there care for her pain?
We should stop it now. All of us. Hamas has to release them immediately. Immediately. This is not a war. This is a crime against humanity, against all women and mothers around the world.
The relatives of hostages have urged access for international aid and health organizations such as the Red Cross to be allowed to treat hostages held in Gaza. Neither organization has said it has been able to meet the hostages since the start of the war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is coming under fierce criticism from some relatives for not doing more to secure their release, as the Israeli military pushes deep into Gaza with an order to destroy Hamas.
We are here to protest against the indiscriminate killing of civilians that we are seeing in the past weeks by Hamas and by the F in the Gaza Strip. We are calling for a ceasefire now and release of the hostages and going towards a solution to this never-ending bloodshed and continued killing.
We are calling to end the deadliest war against Gaza. We condemn the killing of civilians, especially children, no matter if they're Israeli, if they're Palestinians. We want everyone that live inside the border and outside of it, whether it's within Israel, the Gaza Strip, or the West Bank, to live in peace and equality.
The United States and UK, like many other countries, offered their full support to Israel following Hamas's attack on the 7th of October. That commitment stayed steadfast as the Israeli military launched its retaliatory strikes on Gaza. But over the last few days, appeals to Israel to exercise restraint have been stepped up, with the US President and the UK Prime Minister both pushing for greater protections of Palestinian hospitals and civilians. Despite the calls for a ceasefire, Israel has said that Hamas militants, who are holding as many as 240 hostages, would exploit a truce to regroup if there was a ceasefire. When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, Ukrainian families divided again as some flee fighting in the east and south of the country. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on the program. Since 2022, millions of refugees from Ukraine have crossed borders into neighboring countries, and millions more have been forced to flee within the country. Although many have returned home in recent months, families living near the front line are facing the challenging decision to leave again as fighting intensifies.
These Ukrainians have just been evacuated from Toretsk, a town close to the front lines where Ukrainian and Russian forces are fighting fierce battles. For Ola Skarkova, the final straw was her 11-year-old son telling her that he was frightened by the constant shelling nearby. Her mother, who is 69, stayed behind.
My child started to feel very scared. He was very nervous and worried. He was frightened. So I decided to leave. My mother didn't want to leave because she said she doesn't want to be a burden to me.
Moscow denies targeting civilians, but the UN Refugee Agency says about 5 million Ukrainians have been internally displaced by Russia's invasion. Many are from the Donetsk region, which has been hit harder by fighting than any other province. Tatiana, a senior volunteer who has helped to run the shelter since March, left the eastern city of Bakhmut on February the 24th this year, the first anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. She says families with children usually stayed for a few days, while older evacuees were harder to find permanent homes for and sometimes stayed for months.
The elderly don't want to go anywhere. Many of them want to be near their cemetery. As they say, near their relatives. It is important for them. They believe that they will be able to return to their homes soon.
Her roommate Yulia was evacuated in April from Bakhmut, a city that fell to Russian forces after some of the fiercest and most deadly clashes since Russia's invasion in February 2022. The 76-year-old was struck in the hand by a sniper's bullet and lay wounded for 3 days before being rescued by soldiers. Last month, Ukraine started the forced evacuation of around 1,000 children from areas near to the front line as Russia intensified attacks. Parents have been told they must move their families to safety from 31 settlements in the southern Kherson and eastern Donetsk regions. Ukraine says that Russian troops have launched major assaults on a few areas along the eastern front in recent days and intensified shelling in the south. It's feared that Moscow plans attacks on critical infrastructure as winter approaches. Ukraine relies heavily on support from its partners, both militarily and economically. Recent calls from within the United States to review or cut assistance to Kyiv have raised concerns about the future of the aid.
And now let's meet Andriy Ilkiv, a Ukrainian police sapper. He's one of 14 who, despite losing limbs on the battlefield, are returning to work in their demining jobs in the wake of Russia's invasion.
On the battlefields of northeastern Ukraine, a team of sappers risk their lives to clear Russian landmines. Andriy Ilkiv is one such combat engineer. Over a year ago, in September 2022, he had his leg amputated below the knee after a landmine he was working on blew up beneath him. By May of this year, he was back at work. With the help of his prosthetic limb, he was once again sweeping for mines and defusing them.
Of course, obviously, there is fear when you return and you stand next to a minefield. There is fear. But on the other hand, you know that with the help of a metal detector, a sapper spade and special equipment that one can move and conduct demining work.
The 37-year-old father of 4 is one of 14 sappers who returned to their demining jobs in a national police unit of around 100 despite being wounded.
I saw people with artificial limbs. I saw them moving, even taking part in sporting activities, living a very active life. And then I understood it is possible to return to work, to continue working.
Ilkiv's unit was created after Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, and it focuses on humanitarian mine clearance away from the fighting. They are now operating in the regions of Kherson and Kharkiv, chunks of which were recaptured from Russia last year. 4 of their sappers have been killed in blasts and 16 wounded. One of those injured is 51-year-old Valery, who lost his leg in a blast in November last year.
I lifted myself up, looked down, and one of my legs was gone. I moved the toes of my other leg. The leg seemed fine. By then, the guys got to me. They started pulling me out. I tried to help with my good leg. I moved bit by bit and managed to get myself out without triggering the other mines that were there.
Just like Ilkiv, he's back at work. With his morale unshaken, he says he knew even in the immediate aftermath of the blast that he would return to mine clearance work. Ukraine estimates that about a third of the country is now strewn with mines or potentially dangerous war detritus. Kyiv fears it could take decades to clear the area.
And finally, we end the program in South Africa, where a recent report shows that the current female population in the country stands at over 30 million, which is more than half of the population. However, only 38% of small and medium-sized enterprises in the country are owned and led by women. This report highlights several critical concerns regarding this gender disparity and its potential impact on women's economic participation in the country. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, reports.
Historically, women in Africa have been confined to traditional roles, predominantly engaged in domestic activities. The prevalence of polygamy and early marriages in certain regions further limits women's access to education and formal employment. Despite these challenges, some young people continue to dream big.
I want to be an actor. I want to be a psychologist, technologist, engineering.
Even at the top, the gender imbalance is glaring. I had a sit down with entrepreneur and the 2023 Global Good Governance Ambassador Award nominee, Dr. Vivian Mokome.
We have to work as double, as men to prove ourselves. They don't take us serious. Those are the challenges that I faced. We always have to prove a point that we can also make it. In most of the meetings, most of the men, when they see you as a woman, they'll see a panty and underwear. They won't take even your input seriously. And being a black woman is even worse. At some point, I even doubted myself.
What hope is then there for the next generation on the African continent? Founder of She Millionaire Business Award and the 2023 Global Good Governance Ambassador Award nominee, Mandy Shigauge, explains.
I think we need to encourage networking of women, form a lot of organizations that can be able to empower the women. Those government organizations, women organizations that they are doing, we have a lot of mentoring programs to help, because what we need is not to help the African continent, we need to also help the women.
South Africa's Minister of Small Business Development, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, says government is committed to gender equality.
For example, our own government here in South Africa took a conscious decision that business must be given to women 40% of it. That's by government now, to say all of us on our procurement policies, we should strive to ensure that we meet the 40%. And the president has been vocal on that, and we are held accountable when we don't meet those targets.
President Cyril Ramaphosa admits that the fight is far from over.
Women are still overrepresented amongst the poor, the unemployed, and the vulnerable.
It will be a long way before the gender gap is closed. Education and access to opportunity are key.
And that's the program today. But remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelcv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Tenyola Oyetayo. Bye for now.